Sunday, February 2nd, 2020, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So before I start today, I'd like to announce that I'm going to spend a lot more time dedicated to this channel. I'm going to do a lot more work. You can see that I've got a new format for this report. I'd like to thank as well all of your support of the channel, not only through PayPal, Patreon, but also your words of encouragement, your comments, your suggestions as well. When you send links to stories or videos, that really helps to keep my mind going, of course. So yes, thank you very much. The title of my report today, and it is an audio report. I will change things up a little bit more now. The title is From Bretton Woods to August 15th, 1971. This is probably going to be part one of a series of reports related to the history of the monetary system. I was thinking of doing the whole thing, but it would be too long. So I'll probably have something related to this report later on this month. So let's start with the report. Up until August 15th, 1971, when President Richard Nixon suspended the convertibility of the US dollar to gold, all national currencies' values were fixed to the US dollar. This system was called the Bretton Woods Agreement, which was signed by the major Allied countries back in 1944 at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Of course, in 1944, the world was still at war. Under this system, the US dollar was at the center as the United States held the most gold of all the countries in the world. Under this agreement, the US dollar was fixed to a weight of gold, $35 per 1 troy ounce of fine gold, while all the other currencies' exchange rates were fixed to the dollar. Indirectly, other currencies were fixed to gold but could not be converted into gold. The only way for other countries to accumulate gold reserves was to earn US dollars via trade and commerce with the United States or with other countries that had US dollar reserves. The reason why the US dollar was fixed to a weight of gold is that gold has been money for over 3,500 years and is the best and most stable yardstick of value. Gold, too, as former Federal Reserve Board Chairman Alan Greenspan once said, is always accepted as payment, and even in extremis or in times of war or major upheavals. So the paper banknotes we carry in our wallets today were actually promissory notes for gold and silver coins. In Europe, you could redeem your promissory notes until 1914 or before World War I, while in the US, domestic redemption was possible until 1933, when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, forbidding the hoarding of gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates within the continental United States. So the major reason convertibility had to be suspended during World War I in Europe and in 1933 in the United States is that the banks in those countries issued promissory banknotes and bank credit that had no gold backing, and the governments of those countries, of course, went along with the bankers and passed legal tender laws, which basically says that the general public have to accept these empty promissory notes at face value for payment of debts, and that taxes as well can only be paid with these empty promissory notes or also credit entries within the banking system that have no attachment to gold or silver. It is from these legal tender laws that the term fiat currency or fiat money originates, as opposed to commodity money like gold, silver, or copper that have value in the marketplace and do not have to be forced upon the public by legal tender laws like fiat currency. Fiat currency, paper money, or fiat credit entries would never be accepted in the marketplace were it not for legal tender laws. As a result of the Bretton Woods Agreement, the United States became the de facto banker for the world, as its currency was the only one that had gold backing, the only one that could be converted into gold, and the only one that could be used for international trade. Bankers, of course, have the responsibility of making sure that their assets match their liabilities. So in the case of the US, as the banker for the world, the monetary asset it held was gold, while the liabilities were the Federal Reserve notes or dollar bills and bank credit entries. The Bretton Woods Agreement was not a classical international gold standard that existed prior to 1914, where bank promissory notes could be converted for gold domestically and internationally. The rest of the nations involved in the Bretton Woods Agreement had to accept dollars for payment in international trade and commerce. So the United States, as then French Finance Minister Valéry Giscard d'Estaing said in the 1960s, had the exorbitant privilege to print promissory notes and spend them to buy goods and services internationally. The price for that privilege should have been to make sure that its assets and liabilities matched, and that behind every dollar bill or bank credit issued, there would be 1/35 of 1 troy ounce of fine gold matching it. So the United States, like all banks do, abused the privilege by issuing unbacked liabilities in order to pay for government spending in the form of guns and butter, starting in the 1960s. The Vietnam War and the War on Poverty or the Great Society Project could not be financed by taxes alone, as politicians that raise taxes don't have a good track record of getting reelected. Remember how George Herbert Walker Bush of Read My Lips, No New Taxes fame was punished in the 1992 election for going back on his 1988 promise. So by the late 1960s, the major trading partners, France, Germany, and Britain, of the United States knew what was going on, as trade and budget deficits don't lie. So the bank's customers, these foreign countries, were holding a lot of liabilities or dollar bills and bank credit entries, and they were beginning to feel a bit uncomfortable about holding all these dollars. Rising interest rates were also a signal to customers like France, Britain, Germany, Japan, and others. The gold exchange rate at the time was still fixed at $35 per 1 troy ounce, but the price for keeping the exchange fixed at $35 was that the US was losing a great deal of its gold reserves in order to keep the dollar's exchange rate in the international market at $35. This exercise of keeping the gold price from rising was called the London Gold Pool, which weirdly enough saw the banker's customers help the banker in this exercise. I always thought that was strange, that France, Germany, Britain, and others would help the United States, even with some of their gold. So by April 1968, the London Gold Pool could not keep the game of pretend going anymore, and the exchange rate between the ounce of gold and the dollar traded at $38 an ounce on April 1st and was trading at $41.90 on December 31st, 1968, as per the LBMA PM fix. As seen from the LBMA chart below, the gold to dollar exchange rate continued to rise, and by the spring of 1969 had reached a record high of $43.75. By the summer of 1970, it looked like the exchange rate had been brought under control, but by the summer of 1971, control had been lost again, as the exchange rate rose back to around the 1969 high of $43.75. So here's the chart there, courtesy of the LBMA. They got data going back to 1968, and it makes sense because before that the price was kept at 35. This next chart below shows how the banker for the world, aka the United States, gold reserves dropped from just above 20,000 metric tons at around the time of the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944 to under 10,000 metric tons by the time President Richard Nixon decided to temporarily suspend the convertibility of the United States dollar to gold. The reason for the drop in reserves was that the bank's customers, the other countries like Germany, France, Britain, Japan, Switzerland, did not trust the banker, and they were making sure that they exchanged the banker's liabilities that they were holding for gold. You will also notice that the banker's reserves started dropping dramatically in the 1960s, which corresponded to the period when the London Gold Pool was operating. So this chart is courtesy of ingoldwetrust.ch, and the source is the World Gold Council. So yes, the London Gold Pool was using the US gold, maybe some of their gold as well, but not that much, to keep the price fixed at 35. And that's a sign of that. The US had to get rid of the gold to keep that price from rising. In conclusion, the drop in the United States gold reserves starting in the 1960s and culminating on the days preceding President Nixon's Sunday, August 15th, 1971 announcement was an unprecedented bank run on a massive international scale, which had never been seen before. The biggest bank run in the history of the world. Yeah, of course, we didn't see people queuing up outside the banks, but we saw foreign treasuries queuing up outside the US Treasury, not literally, of course, but they were demanding their money or their gold. And President Nixon's suspension of convertibility was actually a declaration of a bank holiday or closure that is still in effect today. Remember that he said that he was suspending it temporarily, and we're still in the temporary right now. The United States could have done two things to keep the Bretton Woods Agreement in place. One thing would have been to have the Federal Reserve raise interest rates in order to make the dollar more attractive to foreigners, so they would exchange their gold for dollars. And the other would have been to devalue the dollar's exchange rate versus gold to a level where the outflow of gold reserves would stop. As we all know, politicians and presidents in particular hate high interest rates, so the first option was out of the question. So why not let the dollar devalue or let the gold to the dollar exchange rate rise? I personally think the US administration at the time thought the United States would lose face by devaluing, or that it would have hurt the United States standing in the world. So anyhow, by closing the bank, the signal it gave to investors was that the US dollar had no clothes, so to speak. And with that signal, the foreign holders of dollars continued to demand physical gold in the international market, as can be seen by the rise in the gold to dollar exchange rate in the next 12 months after August 1971. So as you can see there, we went all the way up to 70 in that exchange rate. So basically the price had doubled from the $35 an ounce that we'd had fixed from 1944 to 1968. Hope you enjoyed this report. As I said, I'm going to continue a series of reports related to monetary history going back to the Bretton Woods Agreement. And keep an eye out for my next report. I'm not going to stop doing my usual videos that I do every day, of course, looking at the markets and other subjects. And today as well, I will be doing my live stream later on at 9 p.m. London or 4 p.m. Eastern Time. If you enjoyed this report, make sure you hit the like button. Think about subscribing to the channel if you haven't yet. Please share this video far and wide. And you can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, BitChute, Steemit, and DTube. I wish you all a great Sunday. Take care. Bye.